What's up, everybody? Drasco here, back at you with another episode of the Peacefully Ambitious CEO podcast. I'm excited to dive into this one because this is where we get rolling on actually making this podcast what I envision it to be, which is this place where business owners, entrepreneurs can come to work specifically on the mindset and on the inner work of becoming better business owners so that they can actually apply all the skills that they constantly learn and invest in. So in the first episode, dove into what I believe a peacefully ambitious CEO is, which is this idea that you want to have the inner peace so you're clear from a mindset and emotional perspective to like do the things you know what you're capable of doing, but get to that place without ever giving up any notion that you shouldn't want more, because I firmly believe good people need to make as much money as possible. And then the CEO aspect is like you're evolving into a position of leadership that can take your business beyond the revenue ceiling that is at right now and step into something that can scale beyond where it is right now, right? So stepping into your embodiment of whatever a peacefully ambitious CEO means and looks like for you and for your business. That was the first episode. All the subsequent episodes from here on out are going to be about how do you actually go about, as a business owner, clearing all of the head trash and emotional blocks of moving forward in a non-friction kind of way. So in order to do that, this whole podcast is going to be dedicated to what I call leadership limits, which are basically the friction points of evolving into the peacefully ambitious CEO. They're all inner leadership limits. Okay. So before we get to those specifically, what I want to spend on today's episode is just kind of diving into the concepts of inner limits and how it applies for business owners versus solopreneurs, and how I see it playing out in all of my clients and the patterns that go along with it. So in order to start this discussion, inner limits 1.0, what are they? So firstly, inner limits, broadly speaking, is anything that gets in your own way to do the things you're capable of doing as a business owner. Okay. All of the things that are like the typical buzzwords as far as imposter syndrome, doubt, etc., they're essentially all just labels to ways in which we get in our own way. Okay. And that could be anything from the mindset, the emotional blocks, the habits, the patterns, the paradigms. All of those things are under the umbrella of inner limits. Okay. So the 1.0 aspect of those is basically when you start out in business, you're going to have to overcome yourself. Like I always say, like if you want to dive like practically into personal development, you either get into a serious relationship, you start a business, or you have a kid. Okay. Those are the things that are going to push you to the edges of what you need to face about yourself in order to actually excel and see, what it is that you are made of. So the 1.0 inner limits, the 1.0 ways in which we get in our own way, is basically what we have to overcome internally to be a successful solopreneur. In my definition, that is reaching the threshold of 6 figures. Okay. At that point, like you have a working version of your offer, you have a working version of who you serve, you have a working version of how you sell, you have a working version of everything, which means you have at least the raw ingredients to put together into establishing like a real business with a team and operations, etc. And of course, should you choose to do that. So when it comes to inner limits 1.0, this is basically everything you have to overcome to make your first 6 figures consistently as a solopreneur. So that is one aspect of it. The other aspect, as far as just succeeding as a solopreneur, is like you have a skill gap. Like you have a skill gap in terms of, marketing and sales and like all of the things. So both of those aspects have to be in place in order for you to get to that 6-figure mark and overcome the inner limits 1.0. in general, how people overcome those that I've seen with working with hundreds of clients around this is you overcome them through what I call out patterns. Okay, so there's 3 core out patterns that help you overcome inner limits. You either outwork, outthink, or outlearn your inner limits to get the results in your life. So outworking means you basically outwork any of the doubt that you would have had starting. Outthink, like you just get better at managing your mind so you can do the actions you need to do to get the results that you want. Or you outlearn by investing in business coaching, mentorships, masterminds, and you execute those skills long enough that like kind of the doubt and the inner limits don't actually matter because you are getting the results that you want. So one or a combo of all 3 generally gets you to the current success level that you have right now. So the problem then isn't that these things don't work. The problem is at some point you're going to hit a mark where everything that you've been doing stops working. All of your outs stop working. So that growth from solopreneur into business owner demands that a lot of the aspects of your business expand, but also you as the owner and leader of that business have to expand equally. So if you think of a simple example, just, working with more clients, like when you work with one client, like you can get away with not having essentially any processes or system. But when you start to have like 10 clients, that is now a mess, right? Like the communication overhead of going from like 1 to 10 clients isn't linear. It's actually exponential, right? Like the coordination now like multiplies, the ripple effects of your decisions multiply, the ripple effects of delay multiplies. And that's just going from like 1 to 10. Like imagine jumping the next bit there. So most of your efforts tend to be spent on managing and improving the systems and all of those aspects, which is great. Like you obviously need to do that. But what we fail to recognize when we go from inner limits 1.0 to inner limits 2.0 is at some point, everything that you've been doing to manage yourself also stops working because the demands are now exponential. Like you might be able to deal with the doubt of having like your own business that you are solely responsible for, but it's a much different pressure when you're responsible for employees, when you're responsible for a lot of clients, when you have like a more established brand and a reputation that can get tarnished by particular ways, when you make promises and, operationally, like we want to deliver it, but can we deliver it? So those things are a lot different when you go from solopreneurship to business ownership. And that's where you hit inner limits 2.0. It is the second version of whatever you overcame when you started your business, and all of the tools you had built to manage it at the solopreneur level no longer works. Okay. So if you think of like a simple example, like let's just say people pleasing. Okay. People pleasing in like the 1.0 solopreneur aspect might look like, okay, I don't set enough boundaries with my clients. And then let's just say you set up systems finally because you got business training on that. And it's like, okay, we're all good. I have the systems. People know when to contact me. We have rules and SOPs in place. And like, what happens if somebody violates that? Great. However, that problem was solved externally. It wasn't actually solved, but like with you making peace around like, I get to express myself and I say what it is that I say. I honor my needs. I hold high standards with regards to what I allow and don't allow into my world. Okay. And doesn't tell me it's a bad thing. It just means like that high standards and low tolerance for the BS that I don't want to see. Right. And when I say no, I mean no. I don't say yes when I mean no. Right. Like that kind of thing. Now, when you have a team, right, you want to get along with your team. You want to enjoy your team, like all of the things. Right. And because your team is now responsible for generating actual results within your business, when your team doesn't perform and your people pleasing kicks in, they don't, like, you set the precedent that like this is appropriate for the business direction that we are going in, and this is the standard like of excellence that you can apply, therefore don't actually change. Like they don't actually know, and or if you don't know how to tell them in a way that's clear and can stand in your power in that, the message might actually get lost. So now your inner limit of people pleasing, which the 1.0 version was solved in solopreneurship because it's actually solved externally with strategy, etc., now fails at the 2.0 level. Like what your business demands, which is a certain excellent standards with your team members, now crumbles because a part of you, subconscious part of you, prioritizes, being liked or wanting to keep the peace, like whatever your paradigm around that is. Now you can try and force more leads into your system, which eventually is going to break because your team, which is supposed to execute on those leads, begins to crumble because, well, they don't even know that they're supposed to be doing better. So inner limits 2.0 is basically where your out patterns, your outwork, outlearn, or outthink stop working to actually get you the result that you want with the next stage of your business. But because you're not looking at the real problem, you keep trying to repeat harder what worked before. And this is what my coaching call the overwhelm hamster wheel. Like it gets overwhelming to put so much of yourself into this to try and make it grow, but you keep hitting the same revenue ceiling, you keep looping around. That's where the problem really lies. So inner limits 2.0 is basically the evolution of either the things that you never addressed as a business owner, as like the human behind the business owner, on your way to success. So you never addressed these things before. And like you knew about them, but you didn't know how to actually solve them. Now it's the limiting factor. It's the bottleneck to actually move you forward to the stage of business that you actually want. So as long as you are stuck on that overwhelm hamster wheel, you can never actually pass that revenue ceiling, or you can never pass it sustainably, or you can never pass it without burning out, because there's just so much leakage either for you as the business owner, and then subsequently it's going to leak into all the other aspects of your business. So really, when it comes to what are the pieces that stop business owners from becoming peacefully ambitious CEOs, it's leadership limits, right? At the solopreneur level, they were inner limits. Now, the 2.0 version of them is actually leadership limits, because it's no longer just you. You have to now lead people. So you got to be self-led first before you can actually lead other people. So that's the idea of the inner limits 2.0. This is the introduction to it. And then on the next two, we're going to dive deeper into like what are actually leadership limits in more depth, what encompasses all of them, how do they show up as a 2.0 version of them. And then that's what we'll be diving into essentially for the rest of the podcast, which is going to be all about, okay, if I have doubt, how do I deal with doubt as a business owner that has a revenue ceiling? How do I deal with imposter syndrome 2.0? What does that actually mean for me? How do I deal with overwhelm? Each of those things that you don't know how to deal with is the leadership limit that's stopping you from becoming a peacefully ambitious CEO. And that's what the rest of the podcast is going to be on. So subscribe if you aren't. And if you actually want to find what your leadership limits are, which out patterns are creating the most overwhelm for you, and what the root cause of your revenue ceiling is, just go to the link in the description. You will be able to go through my Peacefully Ambitious CEO workshop. It'll diagnose all of these things for you, all based off of breaking down hundreds of coaching hours with business owners like yourself. So you are basically getting an in-depth coaching session without me having to actually coach you through it. And best of all, you walk away with an actual blueprint that walks you through the exact thing, like given, like this is what your self-assessments gave you. This is exactly the blueprint for getting out of it. All right. So do that in the link below. Otherwise, make sure to subscribe, share. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at Uplevel Mind Coaching on Instagram and take it from there. See you on the next one.